Hello, everybody. Today's guest is Nissa Keyashian, host of a mindfulmd.com. Nissa is a mother, psychiatrist, life coach, and meditation and yoga instructor. She is the author of the incredibly calming, beautiful book, Practicing Stillness: 50 Simple Exercises to Slow Down, Live in the Moment, and Find Peace. Welcome to Let's Slow Down, Nissa.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Um, I love the word stillness. I've been thinking about it a lot since we had our interview scheduled, and I think it embodies slowing down and peace, and it's a great word. Great word. So what made you decide to pursue stillness as your life's work?
Yeah, so I talk about this a little bit in the introduction of my book, but I went to medical school wanting to become a psychiatrist, but I got a little distracted along the way and ended up matching into internal medicine at UC Davis. Me and my ex-husband moved, bought a house, he got a new job in Sacramento. And I started the internal medicine residency and I was absolutely miserable. And I ended up leaving that residency. And that was a very difficult time in my life because I had a couple $100,000 in loans from medical school and we had moved, we had bought a house, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And so I was dealing with some depression and anxiety at the time. And my ex husband had this book on the shelf called Calming Your Anxious Mind. It was a mindfulness book. And I really needed to calm my anxious mind at that time.
We all do.
And so I started reading that book because I've always found so much peace in reading. And it was a great book. And what really stood out to me from that book is the author spoke about the 7 principles of mindfulness: acceptance, patience, trust, letting go, non judging, non striving, and this Zen Buddhist principle of beginner's mind. And it occurred to me that I had been living the first 27 years of my life almost in direct opposition to those principles, but something deep inside of me knew that they were going to be so key in my healing. And so I started doing the mindfulness practices in that book. And then I started reading a lot of other similar books like Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, Jack Kornfield's book, Sharon Salzberg's book. So a lot of those teachers. And I just found that it brought me so much peace and equanimity. And so I eventually made my way back to psychiatry. And after psychiatry residency, I took a mindfulness clinician course. And so I've been incorporating mindfulness into patient care since then. And it's just been such a key part of both my transformation and also the people I work with have found it to be so helpful.
Wow. And then you decided to write this book about it all and help us. You're really paying it forward after the first book helped you so much. And I will mention, I'm going to, just in case people are like, oh, I want to write all these books down, I'll put them in the show notes, all those titles, because I know that I've read some of them, not all of them, but great references for all of us who are working on this. So thanks for mentioning all of those. And I will link them in the show notes for people to find easily. I'm glad I'm glad you circled back to the psychology and, these practices helped you because your story, not all of us went to med school. Like the details are different, but I think that the heart of it resonates with so many people. I know it does for me. Like we kind of fall into that like autopilot or just doing the next thing we think we're supposed to do. And we do that long enough, we can find ourselves kind of far from home and far away from the goal in our heart and where we really need to be. And I think we've all been there. And some of us notice it sooner than others. Some of us can get back to that quicker than others, but the older we get, I think going to be a time in your life, if it has not happened already, where we're in this situation where we have to really get back in touch with ourselves, who we really are, what we stand for, and just start living in alignment with that again, because it's such a busy world out there that we can get off track without even realizing we're getting off track. There's just so much, which is why practicing stillness and all of these exercises that you share with us can be helpful. And I know they can all, some of them take a long time, some of them you can do very quickly. So I'm excited to dive into those today. Um, you say in your book that most of us want to see more peace in the world. Of course we do, for sure. And finding calm and stillness in yourself is the first step. The practice of stillness teaches you to find the joy, love, and beauty that always exist in the present moment. I thought that was so beautiful because it reminds us that we already have this in us. We just have to get back to it. So, can you talk to us about that? How do we get back to that present moment?
Yeah, so I think if you don't already have some kind of seated practice, the best thing to do is just start very small, like a 2-minute seated meditation. And there's instructions in the book, but uh, there are so many guided meditations that you can find on the internet, but you don't need to do a guided meditation. It's as simple as just setting a timer on your watch or your phone for 2 minutes, finding a place that hopefully the distractions are minimized. And if you feel comfortable, close your eyes and just focus on the feeling of your breath in your body. So you don't want to be thinking about your breath, you want to be feeling your breath in your body. And in my experience, it's best to feel your breath where it feels most pleasant in your body. So some people might focus on their belly, some people might focus on their chest, or even the air moving in and out through your nose. And then your mind is going to wander. That's just what the mind does. You're not doing anything wrong. It's not personal. One of my favorite sayings is the mind produces thoughts like the mouth produces saliva. So that's just what happens. And the key transformational principle in meditation, from my point of view, is the beginning again. So Sharon Salzberg is a Buddhist teacher, and she speaks about this principle of beginning again. So our mind wanders, and when we notice our mind wandered, and sometimes we notice right away, sometimes it's like 20 minutes later, it doesn't matter. We just begin again. So we just come back to our breath. And that principle is so important in our lives as well, because as you were talking earlier, we get distracted, right? We set goals and sometimes we veer off path. And so a lot of us, when we veer off path, we tend to kind of be hard on ourselves and judge ourselves or make it mean that we're not going to be successful. And the key is to let go of that judgment and resistance and just begin again. When you notice that you've veered off track or you've left your breath or whatever your focus of meditation is, you just gently and kindly begin again.
I love that because we are so unbelievably hard on ourselves, and it turns into this whole thing like, okay, I'm, definitely not good enough. I'm not worthy of it. It just turns into like all this stuff where maybe you just need to begin again. Maybe it's all fine. It probably is all fine. Just begin again.
Yes, absolutely.
And when you say it out loud, I feel like it makes perfect sense, but we internalize a lot of this stuff and, overthink it. And we can take ourselves down a rabbit hole, but just begin again. And that's such a
Yeah.
great metaphor for so many things in our lives. Um, you mentioned it can even be like 2 minutes. So we can benefit from something that short. Like, is there an optimal amount of time that we need to be doing these things to really reap the benefits? Or
What I say is just starting with 2 minutes is smart, because sometimes what happens is people are like, they don't have any kind of seated practice and they're like, oh, I'm going to start with 30 minutes. And that's really difficult to do. And we really want to set ourselves up for success. And so that's why starting small, because it's a lot easier to fit in 2 minutes. Usually it's best if you can commit to a specific time every day. I love doing it first thing when I wake up, before my kids wake up, before the other responsibilities of my day start. I just go to the bathroom, take medication, and then I just find my chair and I sit. And if you start with 2 minutes, slowly over time, you can increase the amount of time that you sit.
And that's so interesting. I was going to actually ask you later, but you just hit it about morning routine because I'm fascinated by everyone's morning routine, and I think it's a very powerful thing to include in your life. I just did a whole episode on it. Episode 69 just came out, all about morning routine. So I love that you mentioned that this is part of your morning routine, as it is mine. And I think so many people out there um, try to incorporate in at the same time each day, right? To make it a habit that we stick to, that we want to come back to.
Absolutely.
That helps.
And
Do you,
when your practice falls off, you just begin again, right? And
yep.
there's a lot of times that resistance I was talking about when we judge ourselves or we're hard on ourselves, or we make it mean that we're not going to be successful at it. That's another one of my favorite mindfulness sayings is suffering equals pain times resistance. So as humans, we all have pain. It's unavoidable. We're going to have pain in our lives. But what that equation speaks to is if we can lessen our resistance to our pain, then we lessen our suffering. And so mindfulness and meditation help us see when we are resisting or fighting, whether that's the present moment or things going on in our lives, and see if we can let go of any of that resistance.
How do we do that?
I think, I
Million
think,
dollar question.
yeah, I mean, I think it goes back. Start with 2 minutes of seated meditation practice. And if you already have a seated meditation practice, let's say you have like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, like, can you increase it by a couple of minutes? Because a lot of people, when they start meditating, they tell me, oh, this doesn't work for me. I'm bad at it. I have too many thoughts. And like I said before, that's not anything you're doing wrong. That's just what our brains do. It's not personal. And so if you can just carve that time out in meditation, we are not, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not supposed to think. That's not the goal of meditation, is to not think. In my opinion, and other teachers might have different takes on this, but my opinion is that meditation helps us change our relationship to our thinking. There's like so many sayings that help me. And another saying is the mind is an excellent servant, but a poor master. So much of our life, we're just being thought, right? Like when we're with our family in the grocery store, walking, our mind just going, right? And so thinking when we need it is incredibly useful, but so much of our lives, like we don't need to be thinking. It just takes us away from the present moment. And so as you sit in meditation, you notice when your mind is just kind of going and going. And then you practice that skill of beginning again so that you can use that. You're strengthening neural networks in your brain, mostly like your prefrontal cortex, noticing like when you're distracted, like let's say you're with your children and you want to be spending time with them and you're just like running through your to-do list and everything that's on your schedule for the next week. The more you sit in meditation, the more able you will be in that moment to notice like when your mind is going, and you don't need to be thinking. It's not adding anything to your life. In fact, it's taking you away from the only moment that we ever have, the present moment. So you just begin again. And so you start to use your thinking when you need your thinking and let go of it when you don't.
I love that because it takes away from so much of what we're experiencing, and we can miss out on a lot, a lot. I mean, right, stuff that's right in front of our faces all the time, but maybe we haven't noticed yet. I mean, it's really powerful. So I love this. And I have noticed, correct me on this one if I'm not accurate, but the more you do it, I don't want to say the easier it becomes, but I think you can kind of get into that quiet, peaceful mode a little faster
Yes,
once you get used to doing it, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, there are some awesome studies too on people that are long-term meditators. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with this, but as we age, our gray matter in our brain, so basically like the neuronal cell bodies on the outside of our brain, it's called the gray matter, it thins as we age. So like the thickness kind of like trends down as we age. But they've done studies on people who are long-term meditators, and it's pretty amazing because it just like stays horizontal. So their gray matter, the thickness in their brain, stays steady as they age.
That's
So,
incredible. Can we thicken ours back up if they've already started to thin, or is it
well, I'm not sure about that. Like a lot of this data is new and there needs to be a lot more, but you could stop the further decline, is my
sure?
assumption. But I do know, when we meditate, I don't know how familiar you are with different brain networks. I don't know if you've heard of the DMN, the default mode network. So there's a lot of research on the DMN because it's very active in people that are dealing with like depression and anxiety. And basically, it's all about focusing on ourselves. And in people that meditate, the activity in the DMN goes down. And that's a lot of what mindfulness teaches. There's a think acronym. So when we have thoughts, we can ask, is this thought true? Is it helpful? And the I in think is this all about me? So I'm not sure if you've like I mentioned Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. So he talks a lot about the ego. And so a lot of spiritual teachers talk about the ego. And this ego is different from the ego that like Sigmund Freud references, if you remember, like in psychology. But basically, the ego in spiritual teaching is basically our small I, like our small, insecure I. Eckhart Tolle says that the song of the ego is "I Can't Get No Satisfaction" by Rolling Stone. So it's the part of ourselves that never feels enough, never feel like we have enough, never feel like other people are enough. It basically lives in scarcity and fear. And then we have this bigger I, our higher self, that lives in abundance and love and knows that we are enough and that other people are enough and the world is enough.
It's beautiful. And what are the N and the K of
Yeah,
think?
is this thought necessary? So that was kind of like what I was like referencing earlier about like if you're spending time with your family and you're running through your to-do list, like do you really need to be doing that right now? And then K is this thought kind? Because so much of what we think is not kind to ourselves or to other people.
That's a really great reminder, and it's so true. I mean, I feel like, in talking about stressing out about things, so many of those things don't even ever happen. These things that we worry about, most of them don't happen. And we've wasted all of this energy and time and losing this present moment by worrying about things that are a non-issue. And
Mm,
the less we can
exactly.
do that, the better. We're just going to feel better and enjoy everything more. As you said, the joy, the love, the beauty that's already here. Well,
Yeah.
we need to open our eyes and really pay attention to that, or it's going to pass us right by. I want to go back to those 7 principles you were talking about because there are two that I just wanted to focus on. And the first one was the non-striving piece. As I was reading in your book, I was thinking that, that's truly at the heart of slowing down because you mentioned being aware of the way we've been conditioned to always be going, doing, and consuming. And that's the heart of it. It's like we've been conditioned for our whole lives to just go, go, go. We don't, that is our default. We were talking about the default mode. Like that's our default. We're not even aware of it. That's just how we operate until we can no longer operate that way, until we're, burned out or too exhausted or whatever happens. So, can you give us maybe some practical tips on how to pump the brakes a little bit to find that balance? I know, certainly doing the seated meditations, that sounds like a really great place to start. Um, but how do we, I guess, after we recognize that we're going, going, going too much, that doesn't, it's not serving us. What are some what are some tips from you to what are the next steps?
I, you said aside from meditation. So I think meditation can really help with that piece. And then, because I think meditation helps us quiet down. And so there's seated meditation, but there's also moving meditations. I love yoga. Yoga is a moving meditation. I have so many insights when I'm practicing yoga. So it's interesting because when we say stillness, a lot of people are like, oh, yoga isn't still. But actually, when I use the word stillness, what I'm referencing is stilling our left brain thinking mind. So that narrative voice that we have that's like constantly going. So even though we're moving in yoga, a lot of times the movement helps foster the quieting of that left brain thinking mind so that our intuition and our inner wisdom and our inner healer can get louder. And so a lot of times we have insights. I also just finished the book. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's called The Artist's Way. It came out a couple decades ago.
Wow.
But it's such a beautiful book on nurturing those artistic parts of ourselves. Because like you said, we have just been conditioned to just always be doing, consuming, performing. And I think a lot of that boils down to feeling like we need to tie up our worth in what we accomplish.
Mhm.
It's like kind of like this conditional love. Like I am worthy if I do A, B, C, or D.
Yeah.
And I think what we have to do is we have to slow down to see that we have worth just in who we are. So we start to nurture, even if we didn't receive this when we were young, now that we're adults, it's our responsibility to nurture this unconditional self-love for ourselves, to realize that we have worth just as human beings, not as human doing. And so you don't need to accomplish anything, perform, date, buy, whatever it is. You are just 100% lovable just as you are right now. And sometimes the slowing down has to come first before the belief. A lot of times people want the belief to come first before the action, but sometimes the action helps us with these new beliefs.
I love that. Human beings, not human doings. It's so true. We can just be. And it ties right into, I wanted to ask you about the patience piece as well. And, you were saying when you build awareness of your expectations and the pressure that you place on yourself and others, you'll become better able to release this forcing and live more patiently in harmony with the truth of the present moment. And, this hit me because I definitely have had probably always have unreasonable expectations of myself. It just we just put this stuff on ourselves. I don't know where they came from. I think I've always had them. But this is huge. So having this patience and this awareness around all of this that you don't have to do it all.
Absolutely. Patience is
So,
hard. Patience, I think,
yeah.
is like really hard for me. I don't know if I wrote this in the book, but like the metaphor that really resonates deeply with me is, remembering when I was a little girl and I would see like a flower bud and I would try to open it and then you just damage the flower bud. And I think we do this so much in our lives, as partners or parents or colleagues or, even with our relationship to ourselves. We want to force life to unfold on our schedule. And when we do that, we just kind of destroy the flower bud, right? A
Yeah.
lot of times the universe has access to such a greater truth than our small I, that ego does. And so that's why that it kind of feeds into all the other principles, but trusting that life and the universe and ourselves are going to unfold when they unfold.
Yeah, we don't need to control every little bit of it,
Yes,
right?
that's I love that so much. So I don't know if you know who Elizabeth Gilbert is. She wrote Eat, Pray, Love.
Uh-huh.
One of my favorite quotes is Elizabeth Gilbert said, "You're afraid to surrender because you don't want to lose control, but you never had control. All you had was anxiety." And like,
Yeah.
I love that because I have such an impulse to control things. And I love to remember that quote because control is such an illusion. Like, we actually have very little control in life. A lot of times we like delude ourselves into thinking we have a lot more control than we do. And I love that quote because I remember like, this isn't control, this is my anxiety. Like,
Yeah.
so so like letting go, that's another principle of mindfulness, like seeing when you, if you can notice when you're like trying to grip on and control like other people, situations, life, and see if you can surrender and let go of that control.
I mean, just hearing you say it, it just sounds like, yes, I'll choose that way, please, over the other. The other way is so much harder. And, it's Susie Moore wrote a book called Let It Be Easy. And it's just a really easy, fun, quick read, but there's so much truth in it. And she just brings a lot of these things up. Like, why are you doing that? Why are we doing that to ourselves? Just go enjoy your life. It doesn't all have to be mapped out. And you know what? We can't map it out. Like we can have goals and can have things that we work towards, but let it unfold, right? Let it
Yeah.
unfold. And that's the beauty of living.
That reminds me, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Sharon Salzberg and loving kindness meditation. Basically, loving kindness meditation is where you say phrases for yourself and other people. And Sharon Salzberg offered a phrase of, may I live my life with ease. And when I first started meditating, I didn't like that. I was like, why would I want to live with ease? Like, I'm intense and striving and like, I don't want to live with ease. Right. And like now I'm like, yes, like let's bring in all of the ease.
I love the word ease. That's another one. I think it really kind of like calms you right away when you hear it. And yes, I will take all the ease I can get in my life for sure. I would love to live my life with ease. So going back to the yoga piece for a minute and the moving, I'm glad that you mentioned that because a lot of times, we think of this meditation as the seated, the traditional meditation, but it can be so much more than that. So I want to ask, there's been a lot of talk about somatic healing. Is this movement, is this movement something that can help us through like process big feelings?
100%. Absolutely. For me, it's so healing. I just spend so much of my life in my head. It's almost like I just like live above my shoulders. And when we are in our heads, so much of the time we're not in the present moment because our attention is limited. So if we're thinking a lot, our thoughts usually are about the past or the future. We're not in the present moment. And so yoga literally means union, right? So it's like union of mind and body in the present moment. And so yoga for me helps ground me into my entire body. And when I'm grounded into my entire body, it's like living with ease. It's like being present. You're not being like pulled, like, oh my God, I have to do all this later today or tomorrow, or oh my God, I can't believe I said this like yesterday, right? There's this like resistance to being present here and now. And that resistance comes with the suffering. And so for me, yoga like brings me into my body. And people, if you're not into yoga, walking is another beautiful moving meditation. So, I mean, just going on a walk is great. But if you want to practice walking meditation, there's a lot of instruction on that. There's some in my book, but you can find it pretty much anywhere. You can just kind of do it even in your room, like 6 to 10 feet. You just kind of walk back and forth, and your focus of your meditation is the movement. So you're noticing, like, what is your right hip doing as you lift up your left leg, or like which part of your foot hits first to the ground, and then which is the last part of your foot, when it lifts up. And then your mind's going to wander like it does. And then you just gently and kindly begin again. You come back to grounding your attention on the movement.
So interesting. And it's these movements that we do on autopilot from the moment we open our eyes in the morning, right?
Yeah.
We never
Yeah.
think about that.
Yeah.
It's so interesting. Wow. This is great, Nisa. Is there anything else that you think might be relevant to share with our listeners today about slowing down so that we can just live with more intention and authenticity in our life?
Yeah. So, I spoke a little bit about how yoga can ground us in our body, but there's also, like somatic therapy or somatic coaching, which is, in my opinion, kind of like this beautiful blending of like coaching or therapy with a guided meditation. So, if you have done therapy or coaching, a lot of it tends to be thought-based work, which is awesome. I love a lot of that work. A lot of that work has helped me and other people tremendously. The thing is, I'm not sure if you've ever noticed when you're kind of doing work that sometimes you understand something on an intellectual level, but like on a deeper emotional level, it's not resonating with you. Like somebody might be like, of course you have worth just in who you are. And maybe you understand that intellectually, but it's kind of not resonating on a deeper emotional level. And so
Yeah,
somatic
that can be
work
hard.
is helping you go into your body. So a lot of thought-based work relies a lot on our intellect. And for many of us, intellectualization is actually a defense. So a lot of us, if we have strong intellects when we were younger and we had big emotions, whether or not like our caregivers were not okay with those big emotions or what have you, or we just felt so overwhelmed by those big, difficult emotions, a lot of us ran to our intellects to escape those big emotions. And so a lot of us continue to do that. And so sometimes thought work reinforces that defense of intellectualization. We just keep running to our thinking. And I'm not sure if you've heard of work like The Body Keeps the Score, that book, or other somatic authors like Dr. Gabor Mate, but we store a lot of trauma in our body. And if we're always, when we have these like big, difficult emotions like anger, anxiety, fear, sadness, if we have this tendency to run to our intellect, sometimes we continue to carry that trauma in our bodies and we don't process it and let it go. And so somatic work kind of guides you to kind of stay in your body and process that so that you can let some of that go so you're not carrying that with you on your life's journey.
That sounds so interesting and helpful. It sounds like that. You probably feel like you lose like 100 pounds just by doing that, just getting that weight off you. And probably some of it's stuff you didn't even realize you were carrying.
Yeah. And then the other type of work that I just got trained in and that I have found to be so powerful is the breath work that I was trained in. It's called neurodynamic breath work. It's based on, it's developed by this guy, Michael Stone, who was a holotropic breathwork facilitator. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that kind of breath work, but it's basically high ventilation breath work. And like I was talking about earlier, it quiets down that default mode network. It quiets down our left brain thinking mind so that our inner healer, our inner wisdom, we can become more connected to that. And it's really amazing to me. So what it does is it encourages expanded states of awareness. A lot of people compare it to a lot of like the psychedelic assisted psychotherapy that's being done right now with like ketamine and other psychedelics, but you don't need the psychedelics and breath work. You're using your breath to actually get to those expanded states of awareness. And it's cool because when I've done breath work, it's been so healing for me. It basically, after sometimes, not every time, but after like 20 minutes of breathing, sometimes I feel like I get to this quiet, still place that normally would take me like a couple days on a silent meditation retreat to get to. So it feels like
Wow.
like it feels like a super quick way to get there. And it's really
Yeah.
awesome.
That's amazing that you can
Yeah.
feel a similar effect
Yeah.
without drugs and without 3 days of your life being devoted to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. That's incredible. Oh, this is so interesting. There's so many new things that I've learned today. Thank you for sharing all of this, Nisa. You're just a lovely person. Thank you for all of all of the gifts you're giving this world. I did mention before I was going to, link, there's a ton of books that we mentioned, so I will link them all. But most importantly, I will link Practicing Stillness, your book, because I know people are going to be looking for this. And there are 50 exercises in there. So there's something for everyone, something for every amount of time and every situation that, we're going through. So I look forward to diving deeper into that as well. Thank you so much for your time today, Nisa.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about all of this.
So fun. We'll have you back. I think we have a lot more to unpack here. So there'll have to be a part two one of these days.